Welcome everybody to the panel session on teaching techniques and practices in remote learning environments. The panelists assembled today have over 100 years of teaching experience and bring together a variety of insights on remote learning. That doesn't mean we're old, that just means we're wise, right? As you know, the pandemic forced universities to make a shift to remote learning, and many of the universities and their instructors found themselves unprepared to adapt to the sudden and unplanned transformation in the educational sphere. Hopefully, today's session will identify some useful techniques and practices that you can use for keeping students engaged, motivated, and learning in remote learning environments. I would now like to like each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves, starting with Theresa Bierer.
Hi, everybody. I'm Theresa Bierer, and thank you for asking me to be on this panel. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I'm a professor of practice in the Franke College of Business in Flagstaff, and I have a really diverse background. I was a journalist and a television news anchor for a few years, many years actually, and worked on the NPR radio station in Flagstaff for more than 20 years, but all the while continuing to learn. And I'm really, really blessed to be on the faculty at the Franke College of Business because I've been really impressed by the students and the eagerness for learning. And I think that's about it.
Thank you. Agnes.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Agnes DeFranco. I'm a professor and the Conrad Hilton Distinguished Chair at the Conrad Hilton College at the University of Houston. I've been teaching for over 30 years. So as Galen said, is that we're wise, not old, but I'm very happy to be on this panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Agnes. Alan? I'm
Alan Reich, and I teach at the School of Hotel and Restaurant Management at the University. Oh God, I was going to say University of Houston because I was thinking about saying something about Agnes because I used to teach at the University of Houston with Agnes, and she's a great friend for about 30 years or so. But I teach mainly human resource management and some marketing classes. I spent about 20 years in the industry as a cook, chef, manager, multi-unit manager, corporate manager, owner, and so forth. And I love the hospitality industry. I love teaching, and Galen's a great guy, and I don't know Betsy. I'm sorry. I'll know her by the end of this session. But Theresa is probably one of the more famous people in town. She was always on TV on various types of news programs and stuff. Just great person.
Yeah. And Betsy.
Hi, I'm Betsy Stringham. I am a professor at the School of Hotel, Restaurant, and Tourism Management at New Mexico State University. I've had an interesting career. I've had the opportunity to work for a handful of universities and in the industry before that, in both hotels and food and beverage, although I don't admit that, so I don't have to cook at functions. I've known Galen a long time from when the internet wasn't the internet, and we ran our first conference, and I had to follow a snowplow in State College to be able to use the internet to send out conference papers. That's how long ago, it's been. But
well, kind of give you an insight into my age. I developed my first online course in 1998. So I'm very familiar with these remote learning environments. Okay, let's move on now to the panel questions. Each panelist will have up to 2 minutes. And I know some of you told me that educators cannot talk for 2 minutes or less, but you have up to 2 minutes to respond to each of the questions. The questions will be rotated so that each panelist has an opportunity to answer at least one question first. So I'm going to start off with Theresa. Here's the first question. How do you build strong student relationships while teaching remotely?
Thank you. And I did want to just answer really quick that the reason I was asked by Galen to participate was because I'd done a lot of research right when we went online in 2020, and I presented to the Franke College of Business faculty and engaged in conversations on best practices. So I love this area. And a lot of the things that I've been doing are things that you all have probably been doing for decades, but it's the connection one-on-one with people. And I've read so much about mental health and how our students are suffering and things that are completely out of my control. But some of the same techniques that I use in a regular classroom before the pandemic, which is to come early and stay late and talk with anybody who will be there to talk with me, is something I continue to do. My camera's always on. People come in, I say, how's your semester going? What is your biggest challenge this semester? And just have a conversation. And then as other people are logging on to Zoom, they're joining in on the conversation and listening. And I'm trying to develop a sense of community with that simple act. And I do ask for cameras to come on. At the beginning of the semester, I did that all the time at the beginning of the class. And then I said, okay, you can turn your cameras off now. Or now I say, feel free to leave your cameras off, but in 10 minutes, I'm going to ask everybody to turn them on before we go into our breakout sessions. And I think that just being able to see people is a real way to connect. So that, and I'll just say one more thing that I've sort of discovered along the way is I like to take a roll so I know who comes to class on time. One of the ways I do it is I ask for people to, instead of just saying here, I say, like this morning, I said, why don't you put one word in the chat box about what this Friday means to you? And I had some wild and crazy answers, and we chatted about it. So for about 90 seconds at the beginning of class, we chatted and connected before we got into the content. So those are just a couple of things I've been doing.
Thank you, Theresa. Agnes.
I think mine is pretty simple, similar to Theresa's, except I do it at the very beginning of class before class even started. So what I do is that a week before class starts, I will send all the students an email and ask them to email something back to me. And on that email, I ask for, do you have any concerns about this class? What have you learned about this class? What have you heard about this class? Or do you have a nickname that you want me to address you by? And I always add in one question like what Theresa said, some crazy question like, what ice cream flavor do you like most? Or what cookies do you like most? Because then the first day of class, I can talk about cookies and ice cream and then go into accounting and finance, which, they don't like that much and so on. But this semester, I added something too, is I learned it from one of my colleagues at the university, is that I asked all of them to say, hey, by the way, join me this Friday before class starts on Monday on Teams so that you can log in and see if your system works. Because we talk about student engagement. Well, if you can't even access what's going on, how can you engage, right? So sure enough, I have a student who is a transfer student. She doesn't even know what Teams is. She doesn't know that, as a student, you can download Microsoft free from the university and log on to Teams and download. I mean, she didn't know all that. So by doing that Friday meeting, and it's totally voluntary anyhow, then she feels more comfortable so that when class starts on Monday, she's ready to go. And I do the same thing like what Theresa did, is that in class, I ask them, to just not just give me the answers to questions, but also maybe some opinions so that there's not a wrong answer. And they're used to just answering and not worried about unmuting to answer. And then for the asynchronous class, I normally would send them an email every Sunday and go, now next week, we're going to do all these things. So be careful, watch your deadlines and so on. And midweek, I would send a midweek checkup and go, hey guys, I noticed that, wow, 80% of you finished the quiz already, good job. Now don't forget that it's due on Sunday or something like that. And again, it's all these little things to let them know that we're there for them and they can always find us.
Great. Alan.
Okay, for both my online and remote classes, Zoom classes, I send them an email before classes start to let them know that I care about them. I care about their learning experience. I review the active learning processes, methods that we're going to be using. And I let them know that I try to convince them that if they pay attention in class, if they do the assignments, they put time in, and try to do their best on the assignments, that they'll have a good learning experience from the class. And then one other thing I found over the years is that in grading, we tend to just mark off. In other words, someone gets a 90, 95, and the only thing they see is -5 because they didn't do something. And then they're thinking, oh, I got, -5 or whatever, or, it could be worse. But what I also do is I give only written assignments. I don't have multiple choice questions, true and false. That's just my habit, what I've done for many years. So I'll make comments about their responses. And if it's good or very good or excellent, I'll mention that. If there's some attribute that or something that shows what their decision process is in their response, a certain aspect of a good aspect of being a good manager, I'll go ahead and compliment them on that, and I'll tell them that that's going to be good for their future, and it helps their confidence. Because I find a lot of our students, over 40% of our students are first generation students. So they haven't been in a situation where they've been around with, their parents have, degrees or whatever. So the parents can say, it's good, but if someone with a degree, their teacher says, oh, that's great, it makes them feel good. And what I frequently am able to do is we have a large percentage of students that are actually doing graduate work. In other words, I'll see their responses and I'll let them know that they are doing graduate work, and they get thrilled and they're so happy and so forth. So I think it's sort of a mental connection, as opposed to like managers tell people just do the work and leaders make people feel good about it, about themselves.
Thank you, Alan. Betsy, we after this, we did have one question about tips for an asynchronous environment, which we can get to on instructional behaviors. But Betsy, go ahead.
So in addition to many of these things, I have students do an introduction discussion at the beginning of the semester. And so they introduce themselves, a few things about themselves. And I model that. I go in and tell them the names of my dogs and cats and what I like to do when I'm not at work, in addition to that, and share some pictures of myself in leisure and not just my professional picture to do that. But also, Zoom actually makes it easier to call on them by name. So you use their name regularly in that process. And I like to read their homework in advance of class if I'm doing a synchronous class. And then I know who commented on what, and I can actually say, Agnes, I noticed you commented on this. Can you share more about this? And so my calling them by name and my knowing what their efforts were and their good things, I think that helps build that relationship. But I do also really like the hangout before and after class. That has been really helpful.
Before we get to the next question, someone talked about how do you build relationships while teaching, but in an asynchronous environment. And I'll just speak to that specifically. I think one of the things is really being responsive to their emails. And this is something I emphasize with faculty all the time. It makes a huge difference when you turn it around. And if you can communicate those expectations up front in terms of when you will respond, that's also helpful. Otherwise, they will just assume that it could be within 20 minutes of their email, right? Let's get into the next question. The next question is, how do you effectively measure and assess remote learning? And I'll begin with Agnes.
Okay, so I find that for me, because I teach accounting and finance classes, they're all numbers, that daily learning rather than cramping for an exam, the night before, is the way to go. So I try to design and set reasonable but rigorous expectations for them. So I used to have 5 quizzes, 2 exams, and 2 group projects. Now I have an exam after every single module. So I have 10 quizzes. And it may sound like a whole lot, but 10 quizzes, 2 exams, and 2 projects, that means within the 15 weeks of classes that we have, they have something due every week. So they've got to keep on learning. They cannot just sit back for 2 weeks or 3 weeks and then just start learning again. Now, to be transparent, the 10 quizzes, they're only worth 1 point each, but they should be able to make the 10 quizzes with no problem. And so that 10 point is really for them to study and have that base of a good grade to get started. And before those 10 quizzes, I actually have practice quizzes for them too. And that's also for them to learn everything and to use Blackboard to take quizzes and not to be scared about taking quizzes. The 2 projects are very different. One is a pencil paper, one is on Excel. And I used to do group projects, but now because people are in different time zones even, it's hard for them to get into groups to do group projects. So I'm doing individual projects instead. And finally, the exam, because it's remote, I have them open book, open notes. And I know it's crazy. I've never done that before, but because I can't be monitoring them. And although you have all these software that you can use, but you know what? If students want to cheat, they will cheat. So I'm just going to go, okay, guys, all open book, open notes. But I put enough questions and enough tough questions that they really need to understand the information, because otherwise, even if they have the notes in front of them, they cannot get the right answer. So between practice quizzes, exams, and all that, I use different things to assess the learning because everybody is different. So hopefully everyone has something that they would like to do.
Hey, before I go into the next one, I have a question here. Have your assessment grading policies changed in the remote setting? Did it change for you, Agnes?
Yes, because I added more quizzes and I didn't do the group project. And like Betsy said too, now it's more one-on-one because of that too.
I just want to address that question really quickly, because in the College of Business, a lot of the faculty here, not the School of Hotel and Restaurant Management, had never taught online classes. So moving over into a remote learning environment, they had to adapt the way they assessed. And I can't tell you how many issues that created for me, because the students were comparing how one faculty member teaching the same class assessed with another class. And if they felt like one class was assessed differently or if it was easier, they got upset. I had a Zoom session of 15 students complaining that their class was being assessed more harshly than the other one. So these are some of the challenges that I've had to deal with, just to speak to that directly. Let's move on, Alan.
Okay, this is my attempt at effective measurement of my remote assignments. Basically, I have 3 classes of assignments, review questions where, again, they proved to me that, I didn't mention it yet, but they proved to me that they understand the question, that whatever the topic is of the question. Then there's also case studies, written case studies within those questions. Then I have something called strategy reviews, which I learned from Mike Lefevre a little over 30 years ago. He was one of my mentors then. But basically, writing a 1-paragraph summary of a refereed article and then writing another 1 paragraph of how they could use that in business. And then the third item, which I'm most proud of, a lot of people do it, but I think it's very effective and it works well, is I have a marketing class and a human resource class. Each class will prepare a functional plan, a human resource plan or a marketing plan, where you have your traditional functional areas: internal analysis, environmental analysis, SWOT, key factor, objectives, strategies, tactics, and controls. So, and this will be at the end of the semester. And I have very detailed guidelines for them, a detailed outline, and a sample plan that they can review. So this requires them to take all the major topics that we cover. For example, in marketing, it would be the 4 Ps. In human resources, topics like training and orientation and performance appraisals and so forth. And they have to analyze a business, preferably a business that they're currently working for, on those different areas and rate it according to a 5-point scale. And I ask them to rate it based on it depends on the class, but what customers expect, what competitors are doing, what are best practices, what are company policies, and what do potential employees and actual employees expect. And then that way they learn the concept of management, of the basic responsibilities of managers: plan, organize, lead, control. So they've done it. And then at the end of the semester, they feel confident that they understand human resources or marketing, but they also understand management, and they have the ability to sit in on any type of managers meeting, executive committee meeting, or whatever, because generally people are talking about what's our performance in a certain area, and now they can conceptualize all that and participate. Or if someone asks them, why do you think a certain thing, they can say, well, the customers expect this, our competitors are doing this, and so forth. So
Thank you. Betsy?
So I'm going to take it from more of a holistic point of view, because if I listed all the assessments and all my variety of classes, we'd be here forever. But there's a couple of things. First of all, assume everything is open book, open internet, open friend, open whatever else. And so it's not as many true, false, multiple choice. It's more describe to me how the resort in your hometown is different on this aspect of that, something of that nature. But as an instructor, I have to be significantly more thorough in my instructions and in my rubrics. So I have to, all the questions that they might have asked me in class, I have to have those answered ahead of time. So very detailed instructions, very detailed rubrics. But I also send around a weekly announcement about what's due this week. I recap last week and then I tell them what's due this week, and I ask for any questions there. And so they can respond to that announcement with questions. But a bigger variety of larger holistic projects, if that makes sense, rather than true, false, multiple choice, copy off the internet.
Good. Theresa.
So I am doing quizzes, and I'm doing something brand new this semester in both synchronous and asynchronous classes. I'm doing a weekly deliverable, not in all my classes, but this is what I'm doing. I'm just asking people to turn something in by Friday night at 11:59, and they do a quiz on Friday as well. And my thought there was that it could streamline what we do in class. So every day or every week, they'll have a weekly deliverable, I call it, and it has all of the requirements for the entire week. And it includes our in-class activities, and when we have a bigger paper included, they include that in the deliverable. And I think that they've said it's been helpful for them to stay on track, and especially to have it in advance so they can come to class prepared. So between those two assessments in my asynchronous and synchronous classes, that's what I'm doing this semester.
Good. Let's move on to question 3, beginning with Alan. What synchronous and asynchronous teaching methods have you found useful for particular learning outcomes and activities?
Okay, I've already discussed several of my learning activities, but the main one that I have in class that I really enjoy, and I think the students enjoy, is for any topic that we're covering, I'll focus on a particular learning outcome, and I'll create a case study for that, a typical problem that managers may have to solve. And then I'll divide them up into groups and they work on it for a little bit, and then they come back to the class. If it's if it's in class, it's in class, but I haven't been in class for about a year. But if it's on Zoom, they come back from the breakout room and they describe, how they would solve it. And I think that works well because it gives them a chance to address a certain problem, to learn how to solve a certain problem, how to work in groups, presentation skills. Because I remember when I was going to college, I had one presentation in my 4 years of college, except for the speech class. It was all lecture, memorize things for a test or quiz, and that was it. And now our students, we know that doesn't provide them with a good education. So it gives them a lot more confidence as far as their ability to present a situation, to solve a situation, so that when they get out there in the industry, oh yeah, it's a problem, we can go ahead and solve it.
Good. Betsy.
So I like to do a little more creativity in my classes. So for instance, this last week, they designed a robot to help in hotel operations, and they had to tell me what jobs it would replace. And, they could name anything they wanted. My asynchronous classes, I love Flipgrid. Flipgrid is a video discussion tool, and it's actually been approved by a lot of school districts for its security, but they'll talk to each other forever, whereas they won't write to each other forever, if that makes sense. And so they do a lot of that. I'll do an infographic rather than a report. So it still has to be cited and, all those other pieces, but trying to come up with different ways to engage them to get to that learning outcome. I mean, when you can, you mirror it to the industry, but not everything we do can be mirrored completely back to the industry. I'll have them critique a restaurant menu in a hotel against its market segment. So you can do that and pull it all from asynchronous or synchronous, depending upon how you discuss it.
Good. Theresa.
There are just two things I'm going to say real quick, but for the synchronous classes, I have come up, it wasn't my original idea, I found it in my research. I put a table on the weekly deliverable for our breakout sessions. And so they have to choose a person who's recording what's said. They choose a person who presents when we come back to the main classroom, and they choose a facilitator. And the job of the facilitator is to make sure everybody in the 5-member group is weighing in on whatever the question is. So this table has really created more accountability and more interaction in the breakout. So I'm pretty happy with the way that's working out. And then asynchronously, I came up with this idea last year to have a fishbowl. And we all have probably used fishbowls before. But what I do is I have people sign up for a time. And I know that's kind of challenging with asynchronous because we have some students in China, some in different time zones in the US and Canada. But I'll do it on the weekend. I'll do it 5 in the morning. I'll do it at night. So there'll be plenty of options for you to choose to come and participate. And you know in advance the questions that will be discussed, so you can prepare those. And then we come and we do a Zoom session and we talk about the issues, and it's kind of a friendly exchange. And then I do grade that, the participation. And if somebody absolutely can't come because of work, then I'll come up with an alternate assignment. But I found it, at least the students say they've really liked it.
Oh, good. Hey, Betsy, one question. Could you elaborate on the Flipgrid a little bit more?
Sure. Flipgrid is an external tool to our LMS. You give it a question or set up your discussion, and students, it actually integrates into our LMS. They just push the big red plus sign, and they, rather than writing a few sentences about a response to a discussion, they actually do a video and they discuss it. And then I still require them to video respond to one another. You can set it up for as much time as you want, depending upon the level of the course. I mean, at the graduate level, I have them discussing things that they're going to write on their research paper, and I give them 5 minutes, but they have to have 7 sources. You know, at the 200 level, they come in with 1 source and 1 minute 30 seconds. You know, so it's just a nice tool to use for that. For us, it almost integrates smoothly to our LMS. Sometimes you have to go back into the original Flipgrid tool for grading, but and the students actually are commenting on that in my student evaluations. But another piece of it, and I don't want to take too much time, is I had 2 students of minority populations, 2 different minority populations in my face-to-face class who hid in the back, head down, one had a hat pulled all the time. And I've watched them on Flipgrid and I'm just floored. I'm like, this is the same person. You have intelligence, you talk, for a long time, you interact with your students, you call them by name when you wouldn't even look them in the eye in the other class. So that's been a real benefit of the video discussion for me.
Good. Agnes.
Okay, I'm going to do a little bit something different, and I would like to share my screen. So I don't know if you guys can see my screen right now.
We can see it.
Yeah, okay. So these are my 2 classes. This is from last semester, so it's not there anymore. This is this semester. And they look pretty much the same. But what I was worried about is the asynchronous students, because I'm not with them in class, so I don't know what they're learning and how they're learning. So I want things to be more interactive for them. So for instance, if you take a look at what I had last semester, I have all these laid out for them, objectives and so on, exercises, I have summary videos, I have practice quizzes, and I thought that was pretty good, but that's still one-dimensional. So what I found out was that there's this thing called Articulate, and it's a software, just like what Betsy said, it's a group, something like that. And so now everything is in this recording, this content package. And what you do is that once you launch it, you actually have a whole course. So I have 10 modules, 10 courses, and this is what it looks like versus the old way that you see. So when you start the course, you see the objectives laid out for them right here. They can go continue over here and they go to the first module and they will see, a little bit of verbiage, and then the lecture, 15 minutes max, the PowerPoint, and then they have practices they can do. Okay, what are normal balances of liabilities? And they should be credit and they will be fine. And common stock as credit, but if I put it on the wrong one, it'll go, no, it's not right. And it'll tell me to go and try it again. And then I can also take videos right here. And this is a flip chart that they can do that if, test the debits and credits to increase asset, is it debit or credit? They can just click on it and flip it, and the answer is right there. So they can, again, it's more interactive than for them to just memorize things. So I'm just going to go and show a few other things and so on. So this is similar, again, videos and all that, but they also have this little thing called a scenario that you have different characters that you can pick. And you can say, hey, you got the correct answer. And you can give them anything that you want to do and so on. And this is the last one for this module. And again, you can use different things, but I always have at the end, the practice exercises and the solutions for them. And I also sometimes will tape something so you can see, if you don't know how to get to the answer, follow this and see if it makes sense to you more. So it's more interactive. When it's all said and done, I always go, guys, don't forget, I'm there, your TA is there, we're here for your success. And then always go, now, don't forget, go back out, take your practice quiz and take your real quiz, and we know you can do it. So this is a lot more interactive than the old one that we saw. So, that's what it is.
Yeah, that looks like that's a very nice instructional design. I really, a lot of effort went into putting that together. Excellent example. Okay, moving on to question 4. We're going to start off with Betsy. It says, what challenges have you encountered while teaching remotely? How have you successfully dealt with them?
So I have 2 that I'm going to mention. The first of which is students have a lot more homework, and they're having trouble keeping track of it. So you have to have very organized course development in your modules landing pages. They need exactly what is due today, what is due this week. And again, that announcement also helps them to remind them what's due. But all of those pieces have to be there and be in there working well for them. The other is Zoom fatigue is real. I have a class at 3 o'clock in the afternoon of kids who have been in class since 9 o'clock that morning because we intentionally stacked our face-to-face classes so they only had to be on campus a few days as seniors, and they come in bug-eyed, they just are not real happy to be on Zoom. And so it's all interaction. I've kind of flipped that one. And I have to tell my guest speakers, you only get 20 minutes instead of 40 minutes. And then here's a scenario that you're going to go into with the students, or you bring a scenario and have them solve it, because Zoom fatigue could kill all of us before this pandemic does, and so that's something that we just really have to be, careful with. I put them in a lot more breakout sessions, and they think I randomly call on them coming out of breakout sessions, but I have a system where I know who's been called on lately and who's in what group. And so they never know while they're in that breakout session if they're going to be called on as the one to report out. But that helps break up some of that Zoom fatigue too. So they can't just sit there and listen to their group. They have to at least take enough notes to report out.
I've had some very interesting things reported on Zoom of what the faculty members were witnessing. And we won't go there, but that's been kind of an interesting.
I'll share with you my favorite one. I had a 100 level class last semester, and they weren't keeping their cameras on. So I told them they had to keep their cameras on. And I noticed one student was traveling, and he was taking his phone about to go into the restroom with it on camera. So fortunately, I very quickly clicked off on his camera, and I had noticed that before the students. But I'm thinking, doesn't that, register for you?
Yeah, that would have been interesting. Theresa.
So we're talking about some of the challenges. Yeah, my big one is I like to cold call, like Betsy just said, and I'll call on somebody and they're just not there. And that's happened, not a terrible high amount, but still enough to be disappointing. And then the person will hear their name and they're over there heating up a breakfast burrito and they'll run back and apologize, or I'm out walking my dog, and just things that would absolutely never happen if we were face to face.
Okay. Agnes.
Challenges, I have 2 big ones. The Zoom fatigue, yes, Betsy, totally agree with you. But my 2 big ones is, number one is life takes over. I have students last semester, 2 of them actually contracted COVID. They lost their jobs, their parents lost their jobs and all that. And to have a student engagement, students have to want to be involved. And when life happens, it is hard for them to be involved. And there's this thing called academic homelessness. And that's what we're seeing in some of our students. Now, this semester is a little bit better. I think it may be because that we have a vaccine now, so people are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel a little bit more and so on. And actually, many of my students now are getting jobs back. So they're more open, they're more happy, they're ready to learn more. But last semester was just tough. And then the second challenge is that I would never make the assumption again that my students are more savvy than me. Now, they're more savvy technology-wise when it comes to maybe playing video games. They'll beat me every single time. But when it comes to using the computer, it may not be. Now, they may have the best cell phone, but not when it comes to the computer. They may not have a camera on the computer. So what do we do now? We'll tell them, okay, these are what we need. If you don't, the university has a program. You can go and rent one. You can go and get one for free and so on. So it's just that we just have to be flexible to deal with all these challenges.
No, Agnes, I think that's an important point about being flexible is that when everybody moved to these remote learning environments, many faculty have very strict policies on attendance and other things. And we asked them to take into consideration what our students are going through, their families, some of them getting sick and so forth. The other challenge I dealt with as an administrator was on academic integrity. And there's a number of programs like ProctorU, HonorLock that we can utilize, but a lot of them are going out and grabbing things from different sites and so forth. And I have one programming class that they went out and grabbed some code, which, by the way, is very common for programming. But it was the assignment was worth a very small portion of the class, but the policy was just to flunk them. And and I had one class. I tell you, it involved close to 20 students. And so, yeah, I think in this environment, we have to kind of figure that out. But I had a lot of faculty concerned about maintaining integrity and what tools we could use to do that. So we talked about other ways of evaluating students, but the problem is some of those other ways are very labor intensive, right? So that's one of the things that I think I've seen a lot of faculty grappling with on this. Alan.
Okay, my biggest challenge, I think, has been getting students to participate in class. And I'm still working on it. It's not perfect, but I just try to create a very relaxed atmosphere where we discuss things as opposed to my lecturing. And I ask them what they would do in a particular situation. And then the vast majority participate. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, I also use the breakout rooms. And then there's only one time that I didn't go into a breakout room to see how things were going. So I would just go in and say, any questions? Y'all understand things? What solutions you developed? We have a little discussion, then I go on to the next one, and then they come back and discuss. So the class participation, I would give myself a B on that. I could do a little bit better, but it's going okay. It's, especially considering the virus and Zoom fatigue, as people are mentioning.
Okay, so the next question, we're going to end on a happy note type of question. What unexpected benefits have you found teaching remotely? And let's start off with Theresa.
In my asynchronous class, it's a business communication class, and so we use a lot of video and audio and interaction that way. But I had people do a free writing that I didn't grade for grammar so much, but I just wanted them to pour their hearts out into a writing assignment. And I assigned them to small groups where they posted their writing, and then they had to read each person in their small group and reply. And that was just people shared from the heart in a way that I've never seen before. And then the sharing that went back and forth, I mean, I could see the connections that people were making. And that was really meaningful. And then to what Betsy said, some people who would normally be really quiet, and you have the people who are always raising their hands, but those people I've seen many times become more involved in this environment than they were in the in-person environment, or at least it seems like they are more involved, and they've told me as much, because the breakout sessions are small and they feel less vulnerable perhaps, but so far there are definitely some silver linings, even though it's a pretty challenging time.
Okay, Agnes.
Well, two things. So Theresa talked about the students part already, so I totally agree with that. And again, because we have to organize our classes so good now, especially for asynchronous, so I can now use the time to actually get more in touch with the students one-on-one. And so we establish those relationships better. But the other thing is, unexpected benefit is, I found that I have the most amazing colleagues that when we start talking, we know that we're all trying to struggle to deal with the students, to get them to learn, to do the best for our students. So for instance, this week, some of you may heard that, in Texas, we have this wonderful winter storm and all that. So we're supposed to have a faculty meeting next week. So guess what our dean and associate dean decided to do? They go, no, we're not going to have a faculty meeting. We'll use that time for us to come together as a faculty and talk about what we can do to better serve our students, to better help each other, and so on. So it's just that I just love this environment that we're working in. And it's not just at my college. I'm sure that at your college, and look at this conference as an example, it's the same thing, that we're all here to do the best for our students. So it is not unexpected, but it's just wonderful to see that we have such a great community.
Just having this virtual conference and getting this all together, and I look at the total attendance for this conference, and it just, now I think people now understand the value of Zoom and how we can utilize it and leverage it as we go down the road. And so yeah, I think we've learned a lot from it. Alan.
Okay, as a teacher and as a management teacher, I try to model what a manager should do in various situations in the class and also with students. And one of the things I've realized over the years, I've progressively learned this, and I guess it has something to do with when I was in school, college was about $1,000 a year for room, board, tuition, and laundry. This is Texas A&M, 50 years ago, long time ago. So it wasn't very stressful and most students didn't work, but nowadays we have students that are taking 5 classes, working 20 to 30 or more hours a week, sometimes 2 jobs. They're trying to grow up. They're 18, 19, 20 years old. They have relationships and break up and family situations. They have to go home to wherever it is. And then you add the virus on top of that, where I've had, for example, one student who had 2 immediate family members die from the virus, and she was working to support herself through school and support her mother. So I try to be as understanding as possible and work with them on the vast majority of my assignments. I let them know if it's due on a certain day, they can take a few extra days if they need it without my, having to contact me. If it's going to be longer than that, they can contact me so I can make sure that they don't fall too far behind. And one of the things that distresses me quite a bit is a lot of times they'll say, oh, thank you very much for giving me extra time. Another teacher didn't give me any extra time. And there they are, right on the edge of going over the cliff, mentally. And someone could have said, another teacher could have said, oh, yeah, take another couple of days. It wouldn't have been a problem, but they don't say that. And we just have to treat our students the way we would want our children to be treated, because there's people that have no stress and people that have a tremendous amount of stress, and when you're in that upper spectrum of stress, you know, you need someone to help you out and treat you like a human being.
Yeah. And Betsy,
So to end on a positive note, the guest speaker list is phenomenal when they can come in virtually. So, you know, typically I invite a dozen and I get 3, and I invited 9 and I have 9. I can pull in a wider variety. I can pull in alumni who are only 2 or 3 years out, who otherwise wouldn't have the travel funds or the ability to take off and just come to campus for a few days. But they can log in and our students can see, hey, I can be this person in 3 years from now. So that has really just been phenomenal. And then the other is we've put some of our sections together. So our on-campus students are together with our NMSU online students. And so it's become a much more rich class to have these non-traditional students who are in jobs or military assignments or whatever from all over the world in with my traditional students. And so that has been really wonderful as well.
yeah, it allows us to do these hybrid formats and leverage instructional resources, right?
Right.
I don't know in terms of retrofitting classrooms, if how that went with your institutions. I'd be curious, like at University of Houston, did they spend some time putting equipment into the classrooms, and how did that function?
Yes, so we're very lucky to have, you know, the right equipment and so on to be in there. So we have cameras so that but we have to stay in a spot because the camera doesn't move with us. But we are actually installing, hopefully during spring break, cameras that would follow us when we walk. So at least we don't have to stand in one place. But it's all the other things to more of the safety issues, you know, that we have to clean the area and so on and all that. But yes, all the technology are very important.
Yeah, well, the technology is going to evolve, right? We're seeing it before our eyes. We start off with the simple webcams, and then now we have them moving around, et cetera. What about at New Mexico State?
So they did identify classes that would be delivered in what we call a flex format, which means that you can be in person there and or at home at the same time. And so they went in and retrofitted, I want to say about a dozen classrooms across the university for that and scheduled into that. And so there is a lot more support on that. There's a lot more tech support. I'm part of a Tiger team that goes in and helps other faculty who are having trouble with their online classes. And those are all funded by the provost. You know, a lot more support all around, both equipment as well as just general pedagogical support. So we're seeing a lot of resources directed towards helping our students succeed.
I think, and I'll let Theresa speak next on this. I think Flex is here to stay. It's just another modality now, right? What do you think, Theresa?
I agree. And many college communities are like ours, where the cost of living is extremely high. And a lot of students are saying they're appreciating the opportunity to attend remotely, even though they still at times wish they could be in person. So it has been nice to have the support, just like Betsy had talked about. NAU has the same support with pedagogy, and also the technological teams who are there just like within 2 minutes when you have a problem with the in-class equipment. So.
And, you know, I think with declining enrollments in general for all disciplines and all universities, our ability to reach out to the working professionals is going to be very helpful for us to reach some target audiences using this model. And they'll feel part of the campus, right? Build that sense of community. What do you think about that, Alan?
I've had guest speakers in Indiana, and it takes, you know, it's an hour's time as opposed to their flying in, the expense involved, and so forth.
But Colin, you're correct, is that the flex model is here to stay. It's just keep on evolving. Yeah,
we're all going to have to figure out how to use it. It sounds like, you know, based upon what we've discussed today, that we're finding new ways to teach in a remote learning environments, and the technology continues to evolve. And anyway, I thank you all for your time, my dear friends, for helping with this panel discussion. And you brought up some very valuable insights that hopefully the attendees will be able to benefit from. And I think this is a wonderful conference. I like the virtual conference format. I think here's another benefit, right, of these tools that we have out in the marketplace that we can utilize. Anyway, I wish all of you a happy weekend, and hopefully you can all attend some other great sessions in this conference. Thank you for your time.